Oh, they're coming in. I can already hear. Check in a second. So they are coming. They're walking.
Give me good morning again. What is good morning? Good morning, and pleased to have everyone yet again for another regular briefing as we proceed towards opening arguments of the Derek Chauvin trial. Last week we discussed our ongoing efforts related to 38th in Chicago. The chief announced plans to increase law enforcement presence, noting that that increased presence would be felt throughout the community, and that's in addition to some of the work that we have going through Public Works, our neighborhood community relations and outreach teams, as well as our Office of Violence Prevention. And as of this weekend, we began providing that high visibility patrolling in the area and neighborhoods of 38th and Chicago, and that also includes a command vehicle which is located over at Phelps Park. Chief Arredondo, Council Vice President, Councilmember Cano, and I have all been united in lockstep around this plan and making sure that we're advancing safety as much as humanly possible in that neighborhood. No neighborhood deserves to feel violence and chaos. Everyone should feel comfortable walking on the street, on their sidewalk. Everyone should feel comfortable having their children play outside. And the message that we are delivering clearly to the neighborhood surrounding 38th in Chicago is that you are not forgotten. I understand that Chief Arredondo has had some conversations with a number of individuals and families in the neighborhood, and they have, for the first time in months, felt a whole lot safer. And he'll be discussing that shortly here, but that is a fundamental security that nobody should be denied in our city. Beyond our planning at 38th in Chicago, our entire local government continues to take the necessary steps to shore up community safety as we move towards this second phase of the Derek Chauvin trial, with open arguments coming up on Monday. Joni Hodney and her team at 911 have been working literally around the clock, taking calls from individuals who are at times in their most difficult moments in life. David Rubidor and our NCR staff are doing the necessary work to ensure that two-way line of communication between community, neighborhood associations, and some of the leaders that we're working with on a constant basis to make sure that everyone has the correct information and that we're also able to receive intelligence in real time to make the best possible decisions. And as Chief Arredondo and law enforcement partners mentioned earlier this week, residents should be expecting a gradual increase in law enforcement and National Guard presence as we progress through the trial. And right now, of course, we are entering this second phase with opening arguments in the trial itself. And finally, of course, our CPED department is working to make sure that small and local businesses have the necessary resources and information they need as we progress through the trial. And the message continues to be that our city is open for business. We want to make sure that people are patroning some of these local businesses that have been hit particularly hard by COVID-19 as much as possible. So we're continuing to keep our focus where it belongs, which is on safety, making sure that the security of our residents is paramount, protecting First Amendment speech and the ability to peacefully protest. And we're going to make sure we're getting timely information out to everyone in our community as much and as quickly as possible. And with that, I will turn it over to Chief Arredondo, and we'll note that we will answer questions after our speaker order. Chief.
Thank you, Mayor Frey. Quick update regarding Operation Safety Net. As the Mayor indicated, we are now beginning to look at opening statements next Monday. And as part of the Operation Safety Net 4-phased plan, our communities and residents and businesses can expect to see increased presence from our Operation Safety Net, our mutual aid partners. I also want to just commend and thank for the civic participation, our communities who have gathered and demonstrated over the last few days since the beginning of the trial. They've done so peacefully, and they've assembled and gathered peacefully. We will continue to expect more demonstrations, and as Mayor Fry indicated, the first pillar is that First Amendment constitutionally protected speech for folks to gather together peacefully. So I want to again say thank you for all of those who continue to meet, convene, gather, and demonstrate in that peaceful fashion. I'm pleased that we are continuing to have conversations with community as it relates to 38th Street in Chicago. That's with both residents and certainly business leaders in that area. I want to thank all those neighbors and business owners who are continuing to hold that space in a peaceful manner, recognize and uplift the importance of 38th in Chicago, that central neighborhood, and those conversations will continue to be ongoing. Just switching back as it relates to the trial itself, there have been no reported arrests related to the trial, no reported destruction of property or graffiti. I want to thank all of our mutual aid partners again for their cooperation and continued assistance in that endeavor. So with that, I will turn it over to our interim 911 MECC Assistant Director, Ms. Joni Hodney.
Thank you, Chief. Good morning. I'm Joni Hodney, Hodne, and I'm the new Assistant Director Interim at Minneapolis Emergency Communications Center. I'm here to provide an update on our 911 systems capacity, and we're getting a lot of questions from the public about this topic and about communication as to the best routes to call into Minneapolis 911. We have prepared staffing schedules that allow for a large-scale emergency so we can get assistance added and make sure that we're partnering with our other agencies, other partner agencies, to make sure we can get assistance for additional staffing brought in if needed. If the cell towers become overloaded and we have calls routing into partner agencies, we've developed a dedicated radio channel that can be used to communicate between the PSAPs so that they're not having to call into our already overloaded telephone lines. Should our 911 calls roll to another dispatch center, they can communicate to us on that 911 radio line as well, or transfer medical emergency calls directly to our medical partners. We've acquired a temporary backup facility that will allow us to have some extra additional telecommunicators to answer phone lines. And we're also doing more public education about how people should contact the city if they're not in immediate need of police, fire, or EMS. In Minneapolis, call 311 or log on to the Minneapolis website for non-emergency city information and reporting. Call 911 for life-saving safety emergencies requiring police, fire, or EMS. Call the MPD tip line, 612-692-TIPS or 8477, to report suspicious activity not requiring an immediate response. Businesses and property owners can call 612-673-2499 with general questions about business operations during the trial and general information about the regulations and resources. We will continue to monitor these sites on a regular basis to make sure that we can ensure the best possible service to the residents of the city of Minneapolis. And with that, I will turn it over to David Rubidor.
Thank you, Director. Good morning, everybody. My name is David Rubidor. I'm the Director of the Neighborhood and Community Relations Department with the City of Minneapolis. Last name is spelled R-U-B-E-D-O-R. I have just a few updates I wanted to share regarding just the community engagement work that we're doing, and also ways that residents can stay informed about the latest status of the trial, as well as activities that are going on in the city. So first of all, I want to just reiterate what I had talked about a couple weeks ago, is that the city's website is up and running with the trial page, and I would really encourage people, if you have not already done so, to check that out. It's a good idea to bookmark that and be able to refer back to that periodically over the course of the trial. The city will be updating that with the most current information. We will also continue to provide information about frequently asked questions, safety information, mental health resources, street closures, etc. You can also connect to the city's Facebook and Twitter accounts at that from the website, and so that just helps people stay better informed. So again, go to the city's website, minneapolismn.gov, Minneapolis all the way spelled out, and bookmark that, and just keep checking back to that periodically if you have not done so already. The second thing I wanted to talk about is the radio shows. I had also mentioned that we have radio shows in 4 different languages, English, Spanish, Somali, and Hmong. When the trial was coming up, we committed to actually moving those radio shows to be weekly. Those weekly shows are occurring, and again, there's information on the city's website about connecting to those radio shows, so I would encourage you to check that out. Topics that we have discussed on this radio show so far have included updated COVID information, mental health resources, basically some conversations about how to deal with anxiety and stress through the trial. And upcoming, we are expecting to have some more information about supporting youth during the trial. So the youth coordinating board is coming, as well as the National Guard will be on in an upcoming show as well to talk about their role in the city, and just basically just a better understanding of what they are doing here while the trial is underway. And the last thing I want to talk about is the neighborhood organization meetings. The city has 70 different neighborhood organizations that cover all areas of our city. Our neighborhood organizations are a tremendous resource for community as well as the city government. These neighborhood organizations really deal on a micro level within the city. They deal on local issues, opportunities. It's a great resource for business and residents in their immediate area. They share information about what is going on. They have a chance to pull people together to talk about issues and be able to collectively work on them. The city has a formal relationship with all the organizations, and what we committed to do during the trial was basically meet with them on a weekly basis to share information from the city about what is occurring, hear from them about what issues that they're dealing with so that we have better understanding of that, as well as provide an opportunity for neighborhoods to share with each other what they are doing in regards to the trial. So far, some of the topics that we've discussed there is the use of city funds for trial-related activities. Talked about COVID, resident activities, and then we also provide neighborhood organizations news kits, in essence, information that's coming out from the Joint Information System that they can then turn around and put out through either their emails or their newsletters, and again, just getting a much broader distribution of information. You've heard me say this before, I'll say it again. I'll probably say this for every time you see me. If you have not connected to your neighborhood organization yet, please do so. It's a great resource, as I said, for businesses as well as residents. If you don't know what your neighborhood organization is, you can go to the city's website and directly to the Neighborhood and Community Relations Department. So it would be minneapolismn.gov/NCR. We have a place on there where you can simply enter your address, and it'll tell you what neighborhood you're in, and the website has information about how to connect with your neighborhood association. They would appreciate people signing up, and it's also a way to stay really connected to the work and the updates from the trial. So with that, I'll hand it back to the mayor.
Thank you. I'll open it up to questions.
Mr. Mayor, there was a new video that surfaced last night on Facebook, and according to New Hope Police, it deals with a robbery and carjacking that occurred in New Hope and ended in Minneapolis. Officers show restraint in putting someone in a car, and then the camera shifts over and you can see a couple officers holding someone and another officer taking 2 steps and throwing, I think, what would be described as a haymaker at this person. Can you talk about, do you know what happened in that scenario or what led up to that, or can you give us any background on that incident?
So you mentioned some of the preliminary facts involving the case that was videoed from last night. What I can first tell you is that the case has already been submitted to our Internal Affairs Division. There is an investigation that is already underway. And you all know as well as I do the limitations provided by the Data Practices Act. You probably know the Data Practices Act far more than you'd like to know, and you also know that it's not a matter of me wanting to comment or not comment. I'm literally prohibited from doing so. And if I were to provide further explanation at this point, it would very likely jeopardize the investigation and the case and outcome of it itself. And so with that, I'll turn it over to the chief to see if he can provide any additional information regarding the instance from last night. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. To your question regarding last night's incident, the public information that I'm aware of is that a violent felony carjacking occurred in the city of New Hope. Eventually, that vehicle was picked up by Robbinsdale Police Department. It made its way into Minneapolis. I believe ultimately it was stopped around the 32nd 100 block of James Avenue North. Once Robbinsdale was conducting their stop to try to bring those individuals into custody, at some point in time a help call was toned, and so MPD officers arrived to assist. At some point in time, they needed to make sure one of the individuals out there, the suspects, could get some medical attention. They needed to, because of the crowd, they needed to get him out of the area to get that treatment. Eventually, he was treated. But then the incident you're specifically talking about that has made its way on video, that is being investigated, as the mayor indicated right now. There is an open investigation on that, and so I'm also going to be limited in terms of what I can say to that at this point in time, but I appreciate the question.
Yeah.
There's some people who are calling for you to fire the officer who was seen punching someone. Have you made a decision about that, and will you do it? Why or why not?
Yeah, the question is, there are some individuals in the community who have made a declaration that the officers should be fired. That is, that's not the first time that that type of declaration has been made. As chief, it's important for me. Each case is very different. You have to let the investigation, and I have to receive information. They have to have the time to collect the evidence, and so at this time, there's been no decision, and this just occurred, obviously, last night, and so this is real early into the investigation.
Chief, the incident there in question, that punch, was that related to the carjacking suspects, or was that an auxiliary group of people there? Do you know?
The question is the use of force, or alleged use of force that had come involved in that, was that related to the actual suspect who initially Robbinsdale PD was trying to take in custody? That I don't know at this point in time.
Was that person taken into custody?
The carjacking suspect? Yes.
And then the person
Was taken into
involved in the
custody.
use of force question here, was that person also taken into custody?
Yes. So the other individual that you just mentioned, that suspect was taken into custody as well. Yes.
Chief, you have a message for community. Obviously, people are upset. The perception of this video has a ripple effect, especially through North Minneapolis. People I talk to say, here we go again. What message do you have for community? I know it's early in the investigation, but do you try to calm fears? I mean, people are upset.
Yeah, the question is, what message do I have for community? Some of those community members who have experienced or live with just distrust of police, and so I would say allow us the time to conduct a thorough investigation. As Mayor Fry indicated, this is real recent. We are going to conduct a very thorough investigation. I would also say that many of our community, particularly the 4th Precinct community, they have a really strong relationship with 4th Precinct officers. They have a wonderful leader in Inspector Adams over there. He will not shy away from having tough conversations, and they will continue to show up and be in service of their community. So rest assured, there will be an investigation that takes place, but we are still going to continue to go out there, be in space, provide that service, and do so professionally. And so that would be the message that I would have for that community. as well. The other thing, though, I will say, and this is not specific to that incident, but this is specific, we saw this even last year, we need to allow our men and women to respond to these scenes and help people. We need to allow our ambulances to get into those scenes, and while there may be distrust or sentiment of concern by some community, we have to respond. We're first responders. We thank goodness we've not had a situation I'm aware of, even stemming from last year, where EMS was delayed and someone died as a result of that. But those moments and minutes are very critical, and so if people are experiencing what they feel may be a complaint or an issue by first responders, we can deal with that later, but we want to make sure that we're addressing the important need right now to make sure we're providing for public safety and make life-saving measures. And so that's a message that I would still want all of our Minneapolitans to continue to make sure that our first responders, our fire, our EMS, our police can get in there to those scenes. If they have to help save lives, so they can do that first and foremost.
Chief, are you going to release any body camera video from that incident?
The question is, are we looking at releasing any body-worn camera video? We like to take that as a measured approach. The mayor has been very specific on that. We like to look at these as a case-by-case basis. Again, this is less than 24 hours, and so we want to at least give some chance for the investigation to take part.
Did that investigation, that internal affairs investigation, start last evening or today?
The question was, did the internal affairs investigation start last evening? Typically it does. It's sections of it that what is very typical is pulling reports and securing body-worn camera footage, any other types of video at the scene. And so typically it started last night, but it'll start to ramp up throughout the next several days.
Chief, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the beginning of the video where, I mean, there's an alleged robbery suspect there, and it appears that the officers are handling the suspect with extreme care. It was almost reminiscent of the George Floyd video where someone seemed totally panicked to go into the car. And the officers didn't force this person into the car. In fact, they walked this person away. And is this as a result of Floyd in different training, or what happened in that instant? You know, aside from the punch before that, did anything change there?
Yeah, the question is, you're talking about specifics last night as to officers' response, and is it a response that we've seen differently from last year? Again, as the mayor indicated, I want to be very cautious not to speak too much about the ongoing investigation. What I will say that has, de-escalation is paramount in the work that our officers do. It's paramount in terms of trying to calm tense situations. I will say, and it's not reflective of yesterday's event, but even from last year, this notion that we will have to think of alternative ways to get people who need life-saving measures or medical attention, have to walk them sometimes out of the scene, that's a new normal, quite frankly, that we've seen. It's unfortunate. We want to make sure that EMS, fire can get in there, treat them right where they're at. That's an important life-saving measure. Chief Cruz is here from MFD, but I think he'd agree that seconds and minutes are precious in terms of rendering medical aid. But that is certainly, that's a new normal for us, where we may at times at scenes throughout the city, we have to physically move people away from that scene because they can't manage it right then and there.
Finally, aside from the incident, as a use of force, is a closed fist, running punch, a haymaker, ever authorized as a use of force? If the suspect has a weapon or if your life, is it ever authorized to be used by your police?
The question being, is it ever a punch, an authorized use of force that could ever, in any circumstance, I'm sorry?
That kind of punch. Yeah.
Again, I don't want to specifically talk to the case, but the statutory requirements, 609, the use of force, and it's very broad, and a lot of it has to do with discretion. A lot of it has to do with a reasonable officer, the events, the information, the facts that he or she sees at that time. And so, again, not talking about specific cases, but have there been times absolutely where that's justified? For sure. But use of force, statutorily, it can be very broad, and so I don't want to pin it on a specific situation. Yeah.
Chief, to follow up on, you were talking about the de-escalation techniques and training. Do you know what specifically may have been used in this incident last night, de-escalation-wise?
Well, again, not the question about what types of de-escalation training and what might have been utilized, I'll probably not talk so much about last night's incident, but in general, our officers, one tactic that we're using in terms of de-escalation is time, distance, and cover. If officers have the time where they can slow down the situation, that's a key piece to de-escalation. Distance. If officers can afford themselves some distance from the situation, that's very important. Voice, commands, those types of things. I need you to stay back. We're dealing with this situation. Can you please step back? We'll get you some information here shortly. Please let EMS in to do their jobs, fire, what have you. All of those things are parts of de-escalation, and we are employing our officers to utilize those skills. It's part of our ongoing training, and it will continue to be. In addition to crisis intervention training, we know that there are many in our communities that are suffering wellness issues, trauma issues, and so having that crisis intervention training is very important, recognizing that there may be community members who are struggling, and so it may not be what you see on the surface. There could be other things that are prompting that, and so de-escalation training, crisis intervention training, those are always going to continue to be very key tools for our men and women to utilize.
Thank you so much for your great questions today. I'll take one more from somebody who's not asked yet. Anybody who's not asked a question today yet?
I think every reporter has.
Any other topics?
The city talked about making efforts to ensure that 911 centers can communicate if things get overwhelmed. Can we get more details about what it took to get those dedicated communication channels in place, and is there a substantial cost to the city for that?
So the question was about getting the different communication centers working together to handle the additional 911 calls and the cost to that, and I'll defer that part of it to Mark. As far as getting the communication centers working together, we have set up weekly meetings with the other communication centers, dispatch centers, working with Hennepin County, working with Anoka, working with all of the ones that are surrounding the city where the calls might roll over to them. And we've been working internally with how do we handle those if the calls do get overloaded in Minneapolis, and how can they roll to those other agencies, and developing an education piece for all of us to be able to share those calls and bring them back into our center to be able to get the best response. And this is a plan that we're working on not just within Minneapolis, but how will this work if something happens in another city? So it's going to go both ways for the communication.
Good morning, I'm Mark Ruff, City Coordinator, City of Minneapolis, and part of the departments that report up to me is MECC, the Minneapolis Emergency Communication Center. Liz, to your question about just the cost, I mean, I think what Joni was talking about was just the operational improvements that have been made among PSAPs, the public service answering points. We also, as she mentioned, have worked in 2 existing buildings that are publicly owned to put additional backup facilities so that we have redundancy in our system. Because those are existing facilities, the costs are minor. It's really more the equipment that is necessary and the phone lines, for example, that is necessary for those. So I don't have an exact number for you, but it is not building a new building at this time.
Can I just ask one follow-up question about this phase 2 that's taking place? What will people see differently? Is it going to be more police on the street? Is there going to be more National Guard in the neighborhood? Are we going to see more of the mutual aid response? Can you just talk about that there?
Absolutely. So the question was, what can our residents in our city, business owners and workers expect to see as they progress through phase 2 of the trial? Phase 1 was, of course, jury selection that we are in the process of completing right now. Phase 2 begins with opening arguments, and then the final phase will be the jury deliberation and then finally the verdict. You will see an increased presence. It will be a combination of both National Guard as well as law enforcement officers. That presence will reach capacity at a graduated scale as we get closer into the verdict and deliberations. That capacity, as you know, is about 2,000 National Guard and 1,100 law enforcement partners. I want to really emphasize that the work we're doing is not limited to law enforcement. there is some extraordinary work taking place, whether it's through our Director of Office of Violence Prevention and Sasha Cotton, or Director of NCR and David Rubidor. There's quite a bit of work that's already taken place to do that necessary outreach to the community. But to your question, will residents see an additional presence beginning with this second phase? Yes, they will. Chief, do you have anything further to add as to what that presence will look like, or as the numbers that we'll see beginning on Monday?
Yeah, to the mayor's point, yeah, our residents' businesses will visually see more of our citizen soldiers, our guard, out there, as well as more of the law enforcement presence. We will start to see more of that ramp up in our neighborhoods, whether that be Broadway Avenue, Lake Street, the mall, downtown. So it will extend beyond just right now the Government Center, City Hall Plaza campus. And as the mayor indicated, by phase 3, there will be a much more visible presence of all of those assets throughout our city, entire city.
Thank you very much. Are there any updates you can provide on the Floyd family settlement? Is that still being finalized? Is that work done?
The question was about the Floyd family settlement. No, I apologize. I can't comment about that right now. Thank you, everybody.
Mark?